You know, I joke around a lot on this channel, but let's be serious here for a second. When today's band released their debut album, it literally made the entire world shake. Nobody had ever heard a band like this. They took over America, touring nonstop in support of that earth-shattering LP. Their label begged them to get out album number 2 ASAP. Their sophomore record came out just months after their debut. Unheard of in music at that time, especially for a rookie band. But in the hurried pace to get that second album out, the label kept them on the road. They were slammed. They had to record this in 13 different studios all over the world. Out of this second record came a masterful, feel-good classic that was inspired by a classic novel. The song was exceptional. Had a scorched earth vocal and a blazing guitar and percussion played on. Nobody knows what the hell the drummer was playing. We'll try to solve that today. This song is one of the band's most beloved, but they never actually played it live. Well, until they did a one-off concert after they broke up almost 40 years later, and it was that one time. They were so big, they said no to Woodstock. I mean, who does that? We got a great one coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember poring over the Sears Wish Book catalog, circling what you wanted for Christmas, or your birthday, or what have you as a kid, you're going to dig this channel of full music nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. I know you'll enjoy taking a daily ride in the time machine. We do this every day. So today, we're bringing you another entry from our ongoing Led Zeppelin series, where we pay homage to the great ones, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham, and give you an inside look at their monumental catalog. Past installments, we've told the stories of Kashmir from Physical Graffiti, the Rain Song from Houses of the Holy, and Rock and Roll from 4, or Untitled, or The Ruins, whatever you prefer to call it.
Sounds caress my ear.
But this time, we're going to drop the needle on Zeppelin's 1969 sophomore set, Led Zeppelin 2. And we're going to take an in-depth look at a classic song. Oh, so catchy, so great. Ramble On. So on January 2nd, 1969, Led Zeppelin kicked off their first American tour at West Hollywood's iconic Whiskey A Go-Go. Set the stage for the landmark release of their eponymous debut record that came out 10 days later.
Good times, bad times, you know I had my share.
Within months of its release, Led Zeppelin would ascend to the number 6 spot in the United Kingdom and number 10 in the US. Throughout 1969, the band would keep up a steady barrage of tour dates. You know, they played their way across North America and England. It's during this time of intense touring that they started to work on recording their follow-up album, Led Zeppelin 2. In view of all the full houses and sold-out shows, Atlantic Records founder Ahmet Ertegun was chomping at the bit to get a second Zeppelin record out to the public as soon as possible. And the initial target date he had in mind was actually summer of 1969, roughly just under 6 months after the release of Zeppelin 1. It was a pretty ambitious goal, especially considering just how much touring the band was doing at the time. Ertegun would ultimately relent on the summer release date. He settled for October instead. But even so, Jimmy Page and company, they had their work cut out for them. Releasing 2 albums in less than a year while touring full-time is going to be a formidable task. Having been informed of Ertegun's plans in April of '69, Led Zeppelin's manager Peter Grant talked the foursome into returning to the studio, specifically Olympic Studios in London, where the initial sessions did take place. Olympic was the closest thing to Led Zeppelin's home base in their early years. Preliminary or finishing work on their first 6 records, they all took place at Olympic. But Olympic Studios would only be a prelude to an unrelenting gauntlet of recording sessions that awaited them. Since their touring commitments really never let up, Jimmy Page and his upstarts, they didn't have the luxury of congregating at a single studio to put this album together. fact, Zeppelin II would be recorded at no less than 13 different studios across multiple continents.
With it paid, and it's heading my way.
Now, this was between April and August of '69. The bulk of the work was done in the United States, though, but not entirely. Page, rising to the challenge, he drove his bandmates hard, marshaling them to write wherever they could and steering them to the nearest recording space, whenever they had a free moment from touring. Said Page about it, "It was quite insane, really. We had no time. We had to write numbers in hotel rooms. We put down a rhythm track in London, add the voice in New York, overdub harmonica in Vancouver, and then go back to New York to do the mixing." The production arraigns, that went solely to Jimmy Page. Page envisioned a heavier, more experimental sound for their second album. Because he had complete control of production, these many recording studios basically became his own sonic laboratories. Guitarists would later say that he had wanted two to be quite extreme, show all the peaks of what Led Zeppelin could really do. That it did. It was a groundbreaking record. The recording process also featured a rotating cast of engineers, including George Chiance, Chris Houston, Douglas Geisman, Andy Johns, and the great Eddie Kramer. Said Page about it, "I consciously kept changing engineers because I didn't want people to think that they were responsible for our sound. I wanted people to know that it was me." So after launching the album at Olympic Studios, Zeppelin charted course across the Atlantic for their second American tour. It actually began at Fillmore West in San Francisco. It was on April 24th of 1969. From here on out, Page, Plant, Jones, and Bonham would record the bulk of Led Zeppelin II, pounding away at it throughout much of May, and then, touching things up, fitting in sessions on and off until the closing days, the dog days of August. By which time they were on their third North American tour, actually. Zeppelin II received its final mix by Jimmy Page and engineer Eddie Kramer, who had previously worked with Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles.
Say the joker to the thief.
Love is all you need.
That session took place at New York's A&R studios over the course of about 2 days. Initially, there was some concern that recording levels would be problematic, and Jimmy Page feared that maybe the band had overstepped the mark. After all, the tracks had been cut in so many different studios. And this is back before you had the internet, or email or anything like that. The guitarist admitted that he had some doubts. He would say, "I'd lost confidence with it." However, he and Kramer worked some serious sonic sorcery, and they managed to create a uniform balance on the sophomore record. Kramer summed it up this way: "We cut some of the tracks in some of the most bizarre studios you can imagine, but in the end it sounded bloody marvelous. There was one guy in charge, and that was Mr. Page." So Led Zeppelin closed out their summer U.S. tour on the last day of August, notably skipping out on the historic Woodstock Festival in the process. Although they had actually been invited to perform, their manager, Peter Grant, he just wasn't interested. "I said no to Woodstock because I knew we'd be just another band on the bill," is what he said. Very true. Zeppelin was not just another band. Instead, the quartet played the Texas International Pop Festival in Dallas. When they flew home, they knew they wouldn't be home for very long. Another massive tour loomed on the horizon. They were always on the road at that time. Now, Led Zeppelin II, that was released in North America on October 22nd, 1969. Just like their debut record, Led Zeppelin II was bashed by the critics. It was a maddening pattern that would repeat itself with future releases as well. They just didn't get it. It's just amazing how wrong they really were. Fans were undeterred in their love for this band. Before II even hit the shelves, the follow-up set had already racked up 500,000 pre-orders from the Zeppelin faithful. Those are Beatle-like numbers. The record went on sale in the UK and then continental Europe a short while later, on Halloween, actually, of that year. And on both sides of the Atlantic, II quickly surged to smash hit status. In the United States, it topped the Billboard chart by the end of December, and it became the best-selling LP of the year, unseating the Beatles' Abbey Road from the top spot.
The sun, here comes the sun.
I think you can read some symbolism into that one for sure. The top band of the 60s, stepping aside for what would become the top band of the 70s. Changing of the guard for sure. The two biggest bands ever bumping up against each other, one kind of going down and one coming up as the Beatles broke up. In the UK, Zeppelin 2 entered the chart on November 8th and stayed there for 129 weeks. It reached number 1 on February 1st of 70. It's also topping the charts in Australia, Canada, West Germany, Spain, and Denmark, and it went to number 2 in Italy and Norway, number 3 in France, 8 in Japan. Additionally, this LP would sell 16 million copies worldwide. There is no doubt that Led Zeppelin 2 has proven to be a seminal record with an iconic track list. I mean, this beast of an album is filled to the brim with classic rock standards, period. From fierce and commanding rockers like Whole Lotta Love and Heartbreaker, to the dynamic what is and what should never be,
And happiness is what you need so bad.
to the emotional ode thank you. This is without a doubt a desert island album, but honestly, what Led Zeppelin album isn't?
Tears of love lost in the days gone by.
Now, as for today's featured track, Ramble On, one of my favorites, that was recorded at 2 New York locations, Groove Studios and Juggy Sound. It was on back-to-back days, June 1st and 2nd, 1969. This song really offers a taste of things to come on Zeppelin's future albums. Song is Fly to Folk Rock Fantasy, a thematic approach that Robert Plant would explore a lot, very often. Robert Plant had a passion for folktales, and he loved creating fantasy-driven worlds within Zeppelin songs. Time and again, he drew on images of forests and castles, swords and sorcery, mythical creatures, and other fantasy elements for his lyrics.
Years ago, in days of old, when magic filled the air.
In a way, he was like a romantic troubadour from another time and place entirely. Maybe even another realm. John Paul Jones summed it up succinctly when he said, Robert was into all that fairy stuff. Plant also had a keen interest in the Celtic and Norse history, the mythology. Immigrant Song owes its existence to the latter, of course. But the fantasy fiction of J.R. Tolkien holds an important place among all of his influences. Digging into Zeppelin's Tolkien connections, there are more than a few Led Zeppelin songs that have or may have connections to Tolkien's Middle-earth. For starters, there's some clear-cut candidates. There's Misty Mountain Hop, which references Middle-earth geography. And the Battle of Evermore, of course, which cites the Dark Lord, the Queen of Light, and Ringwraiths. Some listeners also see allusions to Tolkien's sprawling fantasy world and Over the Hills and Far Away, No Quarter, and of course, Four Sticks. And then there's Stairway to Heaven. I mean, some fans are adamant that images like Rings of Smoke, Look into the West, and even The Lady, they're all references to Lord of the Rings. Not a lot to go on, but I can see why some people interpret it that way. What do you think? Let's talk about it in the comments below. We've looked into all that in our Stairway to Heaven episode, so won't get into it here. But the point is, in some degree at least, Tolkien's magical world and Robert Plant's imagination converged in his lyrics.
And my spirit is crying for leaving.
Plant even named his dog Strider, an alias for the character from The Return of the King, Aragorn. He also dedicated Bron-Yr Stomp to Strider, so there's that as well. But getting back to Ramble On, from what I can tell, this was the first Zeppelin song to channel the Lord of the Rings. In Ramble On, Robert Plant takes us on a journey that sometimes veers off to follow in the footsteps of Tolkien's Hobbit hero, Frodo Baggins. Though not exactly faithful to the plot of the books, it does give us some Middle-earth name checks and some legitimate fan fiction prompts, if you will. Plant would actually say later that he was actually embarrassed by the song's Tolkien references because they didn't make much sense, is what he would say. A fair maiden wouldn't be found in Mordor.
I met a girl so fair.
And the One Ring-obsessed Gollum wouldn't give her the time of day anyway, but, that's art. You pay homage to your influences and you draw on them to create something entirely new, something transformative.
But Gollum, the evil one, crept up.
The track's epic journey, though, begins with the autumn moon lighting Plant's path. Leaves are falling all around, and he knows it's time that he's on his way.
Leaves are falling all around.
As he rambles on, he sings his song and searches the world for his girl, calling her the queen of all his dreams. Now, by the time the journey has reached the final verse, that's when all the Tolkien imagery starts showing up. As the song closes out, Robert Plant sings that he can't stop this feeling in his heart, and he's got to keep on searching for his baby. Even though he hasn't found his girl yet, in the end, he just keeps rambling on, going on the journey here. Jimmy Page's guitar work on the song, it's just a perfect companion to Plant's archaic lyrical lens. Opening the track with a beautiful acoustic lead-in and giving us a near-medieval feel in E major. John Bonham, for his part, gives us some serious handcrafted percussion, possibly tapping it out on a guitar case with his fingers or open palms. Try listening to this song and not tapping your fingers on something, or even your toes. Pretty much impossible. But actually, going back to Bonham, what makeshift instrument he actually used, that's been a matter of debate since the release of the album. Other theories propose that Bonzo used the lid of a plastic trash can, the soles of his shoes even, a floor tom covered in a towel, a seat cushion, maybe even bongos. But whatever the object was, that matters less than the fact that he nailed it. It's a big reason why we can't stop from moving when this song comes on. After a few bars, John Paul, he comes in on his jazz bass, soft and smooth. Meanwhile, Plant's voice is just warm and tender, at least until it isn't. Ramble On gives us another iconic Plant performance in which he shows off his supreme vocal prowess. It's like he just flips a switch and goes straight into savage rock mode.
But I know about one thing I got to do. Ramble on.
And when he does, he is instantly and intensely supported by the rest of the band, who just hits it hard. I mean, come on, this is Zeppelin too. The guys are going to rock out at some point. The Ramble On, it wasn't released as a single. Another one of those great Zeppelin songs they didn't drop as a single. That was a fairly uncommon occurrence for Led Zeppelin anyway. Whole Lot of Love got the honors for that on Zeppelin 2. It became their biggest hit. You could hear Living, Loving Maid. She's just a woman on the flip side of that.
I'm gonna give you my love. I'm gonna give you my love. Only paying your bill, baby. Love it.
However, Ramble On's non-single status, that wouldn't hold it back from becoming an AOR radio staple and from later stockpiling millions of streams in the new millennium. I mean, I just checked a few days ago. Between Spotify and YouTube, Ramble On has almost 400 million streams and counting. This legendary song, it's also made its mark in modern pop culture. It's appeared in a number of movies and TV shows.
And it's heading my way.
It was in Tom Cruise's Oblivion, Supernatural, The Friend, Project Eve, Uncharted, and The Winchesters, just to name a couple.
Guess I'll keep on living.
Ramble On, it's also been covered by a lot of artists. Of course it has. Zeppelin. A sampling of that list includes Train,
I'm gonna round the world and find my girl. I'm on my way.
Great White, Everclear, Fish, Vanilla Fudge, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Randy Jackson, Kid Rock, Rick Derringer, and one of my favorites, The Replacements. Oh, and in 2008, the Foo Fighters played London's Wembley Stadium side by side with none other than Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones for a 2-song collaboration. There was Rock and Roll and Ramble On. 86,000 fans were in attendance there.
Leaves are falling all around.
Dave Grohl said that it was an honor to be there because England's music had made them the band that they were. I mean, no doubt he had Led Zeppelin in mind while he was talking. I mean, the truth is, Led Zeppelin, like the Beatles, 2 bands that have had that kind of effect on virtually everyone. Ramble On also has kind of a head-scratching claim to fame as well. Just like a few other songs of Zeppelin's catalog that are big. It's never been performed live by the foursome. Well, when they were still together, at least not in its entirety. However, the song would get some love from the band members after John Bonham sadly passed in 1980. Robert Plant would perform Ramble On regularly on his solo tours. It was also, it would become a part of Page and Plant's live set in the 90s. It was finally performed live by all 3 remaining members of Zeppelin that on December 10th, 2007. That was at the Ahmet Ertegun tribute concert, and Jason Bonham, he actually sat down at the drum kit in place of his father. So that's about as close as you're going to get to hear Led Zeppelin play this one live. Again, they finally did it almost 40 years after they first wrote it. So this song, it has kind of a funny personal memory for me. One day I was listening to Ramble On, Zeppelin 2, on my Walkman while doing some work for my dad in his paint shop. My dad was across the way varnishing some cabinets. He was listening to his 8-track player. So we were both working. I have in my headphones. My dad's listening with his speakers. Ramble On comes on my Walkman, and of course I couldn't help but start drumming along to it with my fingers while I'm working. A few minutes later, I noticed that my dad is tapping his fingers on some cabinets and he's rocking out, he's singing. And I take off my headphones for a second and I'm like, what is he rocking out to? Any guesses? My dad and I were both jamming to the same song, Ramble On. He was listening to the 8-track, I was listening to the cassette through my Walkman. It was that Zeppelin energy. Like father, like son. Make sure to check out the Becoming Led Zeppelin documentary. It's amazing. It's a must-see. Perfect documentary. I have one gripe. I can't go into it right now because, well, you got to watch it and then we'll talk about it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Led Zeppelin and Ramble On. What are your memories of this song, of Zeppelin 2? What do you feel about the song? The different parts, everybody's contribution to it. Let's have a great discussion below. I think Zeppelin 2 is one of their best albums. Of course, I say that about every Zeppelin album. And, you know, they took over for the Beatles, really. The Beatles were going down. They were coming up. Just amazing. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We would love to have you as part of our community. That's what it's about, keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.